One of the tricky things about these books of kings is keeping track of what is going on and where, as so many of these kings have such similar names. In chapter 14, we are introduced to a man called Amaziah. He was the son of Joash, who, as you'll remember, was assassinated by his own officials. They conspired against him and had him killed. We read that he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, verse 3, but not as his father David had done. Where David was wholehearted, Amaziah was half-hearted. He did many great things in battle, but then it seems he got a bit too big for his boots. And the Bible teaches that pride comes before a fall in Proverbs 16:18, and it seems like that is what is going on here. So he sends messengers to the north and says, "Come, let us face each other in battle," and he gets a rather thorny response from the king up north in Israel. Jehoash writes back, "A thistle in Lebanon sent a message to a cedar in Lebanon, 'Give your daughter to my son in marriage.' Then a wild beast in Lebanon came along and trampled the thistle underfoot." It's a funny little parable. It can be read in several ways, almost all of which are insulting for the southern king. The thistle should not be approaching the cedar tree. They're cut from a different cloth. The lower one has far too high an estimation of himself, right? "Give your daughter to marry my son." "What are you talking about?" the cedar would say. "You are a literal weed. What would I have to do with you?" And then a wild beast wanders through the area and the thistle gets trampled on. It's the vulnerability, the utter weakness of the thistle that is in view here. It's embarrassing that it thought so much of itself, and now we can all see that actually it belongs on the underside of a wild beast's hoof. If the thistle wrote such a letter to the cedar tree, well, the cedar tree would respond by saying, "You are not worthy." But as it is, the king of the south has challenged the king of the north to battle, and the answer amounts to the same. You are not worthy. You've defeated Edom, but now you are arrogant. Glory in your victory, but stay home. Why ask for trouble and cause your own downfall, and that of Judah also? Amaziah, however, refuses to relent, and instead he marches in battle against the north, at which point he does indeed get thoroughly trounced, totally defeated. His army flees, each man to his own home, and he, Amaziah, the king of Judah, he is captured by Jehoaz, the king of Israel. A stretch of wall about 400 cubits long, that's about 180 meters. It is torn down, leaving Israel robbed of its glory and vulnerable to further attack from the enemy. What a terrible miscalculation this was from the king of the south. Well, the northern king dies and his son succeeds him as king, and just a few years later, the king of the south, the one who started this ill-advised war, he dies, though the narrative makes clear that his death was not of natural causes. Just as his father was killed, so he now is also slain by conspirators within the palace, and his son succeeds him as king. So, in fairly quick succession then, the kings of both these kingdoms have been shuffled off the stage to be replaced, each one by their son. Up north, we now have Jeroboam, and down south, we have Azariah. Now, it's worth pointing out, this is not the first Jeroboam we have seen. In fact, you might remember, all the way back in the book of 1 Kings, it was Jeroboam who brought back the split of the kingdom in the first place. You remember that? Jeroboam incited a rebellion against the son of Solomon and took 10 tribes with him in rejecting the worship of the one true God. Jeroboam was an evil man. And so, as we've said before, to name your son after an evil king is to make a very clear statement about what you consider to be impressive. These two men share a name, and they have a very similar nature. We read, Jeroboam the second did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not turn away from any of the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, he had caused Israel to commit. He encouraged the idolatry and rebelled relentlessly against the living God. In some ways, a strange chapter, because everything we've seen in that northern kingdom is evil. So why did the Lord let them win this war against the much more godly south? We will see this time and time again in the Bible. God's people will be defeated, but they won't always be defeated by people who are good, but indeed people who are evil. The whole book of Habakkuk is wrestling with this question. What is God up to when such things take place? Well, for today, the short answer is simply this. He is humbling his legitimate people, causing them to despair of their own strength and instead cry out to the living God. Amaziah failed because Amaziah did not trust God. Though his aims may have been good in wiping out idolatry in Israel, his aims may have been good, his attitude wasn't. And the Lord used an evil enemy to humble him. Well, that narrative can only make sense if we take into account that in the end, the judge of all the world will do what is right. And even these enemy nations will not be victorious in the end. The lesson for us to learn is to be humble and to trust in God and to ask Him for His help and to know that while everything may not work out within our lifetime, by the grace and power of God, it will work out in the end.